Kararagi Reaper Incident IV, LQAI Translation 1. The Kararagi City-State's second city, Bonin. A few days earlier, the metropolis had been struck by an unprecedented wind disaster, and the sting of that great damage had yet to subside when, as if to pile calamity upon calamity, the next disaster, a gigantic black tornado, was drawing near. Julius, to dismiss this as coincidence stretches credulity. Murmuring thus, Julius ran against the tide of the masses fleeing the tornado, cutting through a cityscape where restoration work was still sporadic, toward the heart of the calamity. Fortunately, the city had many hands gathered from across Kararagi for the sake of reconstruction, mercenaries for maintaining public order, workers for clearing rubble and rebuilding structures, so the evacuation of the residents could likely be left to them. Hallible, but that means the more hands there are, the more folks are gonna get caught up in it, you know. Running abreast with Hallible, who harbored the same impression, the same concern, Julius nodded with a indeed, and summoned Arrow, the spirit who obeyed him. There was something he wished to confirm with her, a wind spirit, but Julius. From the look of it, it seems I need not even ask. The faintly green glimmering spirit who had answered his call tried to carry herself stoutly before her contractor, yet she could not suppress the subtle tremor in her odd. There was no reason for a spirit to fear abnormal weather, which meant that was Hallible. A spirit-related magical calamity, then. In that case, we talkin' 'bout Tia-chan Bane involved. At the question, a white-haired woman confined in a Zashiki cell flashed across Julius's mind. Arrested as the cause of the previous wind disaster, she had proved to be a very high-ranking great spirit. It was hard to imagine that Tia, the name she had given, and this wind disaster before them were unconnected. Julius, that it is a magical calamity is certain, that it is related to her as well, yet I do not believe it is her own malice. Hallible, that your hunch as a handsome fella and a spiritual arts user talkin'. Julius, I affirm it and shall take it as praise. I engage. Once they had reached the outskirts where no evacuating figures remained and several broken buildings lay untouched, Julius leveled his blade's tip at the tornado visible in the distance and came to a halt. Of course, one could not expect an honorable match against a tornado. He dispensed with preamble. Julius. El Fula. A pale radiance dwelt upon the blade's tip, and the power of 6 spirits with Arrow at their center converged. What he loosed was a counter-rotating gale aimed at annihilating the tornado through cancellation. It thrust straight in, surging toward the tornado that was closing on the city as it swept up sand and stone from the plain. Hallible. This ain't good. I ain't seein' a killin' spot. Almost at the same moment as Hallible's breath, his hand raised as a visor, the gale was helplessly swallowed by the tornado and became but one more part of the wind disaster. Feeling no purchase and seeing it taken in an instant, Julius immediately shifted his awareness. That tornado was not a mere extension of a wind disaster, but an attack suffused with a very strong intent. Julius, if we continue to oppose it as we just did, we shall only make that tornado still larger. Hallible, then what do? Scoop everybody up and make a run for it? Julius, no. Lady Anastasia ordered us to hold that thing up. Had it been within our power, I would have wished for us to erase it ourselves. But let us return to our initial objective. We shall slacken the tornado's advance. Given the speed at which the gigantic black tornado was advancing, a full evacuation of the city's residents was not realistic. What was more, if that tornado possessed intent, its harm might not stop with the city alone. Therefore, as a knight who protected the innocent populace, Julius could not yield to that wind disaster. Julius, Arrow, I would borrow your strength once more. To fight a wind disaster, you are indispensable. Hallible, I shall ask for your aid as well. Will that be acceptable? Hallible, reckon as things stand, 'bout all I can do is poke and prod while huntin' for a weak point. So let me see you show your stuff. Julius returned a nod to Hallible and to Arrow, who burned for a chance at restoring her honor, and looked to the tornado. Here and now, the best move available to Julius was a tactic of delaying the tornado, and Julius, to place my faith in you, Anastasia-sama. To Tia, what are they even doing? We've got to stop that tornado. So why are they attacking nothing but totally off-base spots? At her side, Anastasia, having grasped what Julius and the others who had gone on ahead were aiming for, snapped her fingers. She had ordered them to hobble the tornado and left the concrete methods to them. But Ricardo, I get what Miss Tia's sayin', too. They're freezin' the ground and even lightin' fires near the twister. I ain't got a clue what Julius is up to. Anastasia, what are you talkin' about? He's just bane proper and followin' my orders. Look, at Anastasia's words, Ricardo, who had been grimacing much like Tia, narrowed his eyes. For a short while he puzzled over what he was supposed to be seeing, but soon went, "Huh," and realized, Ricardo, the tornado's slowin' down, ain't it? Tia, "Huh, really? Why? They aren't doing anything to the tornado." Confronted with the immovable fact, Ricardo and Tia raised their voices in surprise. But the two of them were not mistaken. The tornado was certainly slackening, easing its momentum. Aridna, I see. Rather than attacking the tornado directly, they went for the meteorological environment. Even if it's wind raised by magic, it still obeys the bare minimum of natural laws. Anastasia, big winds come from hot and cold winds gettin' into a fight, right? Julius is deliberately knockin' that balance out of whack. Smart boy, just what I'd expect from my knight. Tilting her chin at the understanding voiced by Echidna at her throat, Anastasia praised Julius's judgment. He had executed Anastasia's orders magnificently. Hallibal, alongside him, was apparently pitching ruined buildings and needless boulders into the tornado to help slow it as well. Whether the more it swallowed, the fatter and thus slower a tornado would get was anyone's guess. Anastasia, those two bought us time. Next is you, Miss Tia. Tia, what? Anastasia, you talked a big game, didn't ya? You went and tore up our Ricardo, too. So is it fair for me to figure you're skilled enough to scrap with that tornado? At Anastasia's question, Tia's golden eyes narrowed to slits. From what they'd heard, Tia, being a great spirit, had whipped up a massive wind with magic and floated Bonan's residence and buildings whole into the sky. In terms of sheer scale, she should be a good match for the oncoming tornado. Yet faced with that expectation, Tia averted her gaze and groaned. Ah, oog. Ricardo, what, so it's a no-go? Seein' you act like that before we've even started is the last thing I wanted, Tia-chan. Tia, you've got a mouth on you, wanna die. Can't be helped, okay? If that were just a draft or some petty spirit's prank, I'd have blown it away. But, Anastasia, but what is it? Tia, because that's the handiwork of the one usin' my light orb. The odds are stacked against me. At Tia's halting answer, Anastasia and Ricardo traded looks. Ricardo, that again, so what the hell is this light orb anyway? Tia, a light orb's a light orb. It's my precious thing that got stolen and it's why I'm mad. Aridna, judging from Miss Tia's attitude and our exchanges so far, I surmise it's something like the source of her power. She had it taken from her, and that tornado was raised by the one who stole it. Hence, the odds don't favor her. Anastasia, if that's so, how bad are the odds for you, Miss Tia? At Anastasia's question, given in accord with Echidna's reading, Tia made a guttural sound in her throat. Even if she herself had said it, she likely didn't want to acknowledge the fact that the odds were against her. Wavering, she greatly contorted those keen, blade-like good looks, and Tia, 50-50. Ricardo, that ain't a 50-50 face. Looks more like 90-10 to me. Tia, you trying to get yourself killed. It's not that far apart. At worst, it's 70-30. Anastasia, 70-30, yeah, that's definitely bad odds. Realizing her slip, Tia groaned, you. Thinking what a groany spirit she was, Anastasia mouthed very softly, 70-30. Tia was a great spirit as well. If what she had just said wasn't mere bravado, then if one set that tornado as a 7, she could muster a 3 on the wind scale. If that was the case, Mimi. Aju, everybody assemble. What are we doin'? Right then, with Mimi charging in at their head, the Iron Fang who'd come to Bonin ran up. Welcoming them, Anastasia softened her cheeks, having gotten exactly what she wanted. Anastasia, now ain't that sweet of y'all really knowin' how to make me happy. Ricardo, talkin' like that means you thought of somethin', Anna. Anastasia, course I did. Come on now, hop to it, everyone. Miss Tia, you're followin' my lead too. At Anastasia's brisk clapping, Iron Fang answered as one. Seeing Ricardo raise the hooked claws of his right hand in reply as well, Tia shut one eye and Tia. I'll just say this. If you make me pull any stupid stunts, I'll kill you. Then waited for the instructions with an attitude not one bit meek. 3 Julius. Hick, Hallible, even just one more move. Hallible, no, you can't be pushing it. Any more and we'll get swallowed up ourselves. Hallible, who had been yanking out the pillars of ruined buildings and feeding them to the tornado, recommended retreat as the funnel cloud drew to within several hundred meters of the city. Chagrined by those words, Julius nevertheless obeyed Hallible and lowered his blade. Surveying the situation from above, Hallible possessed a broader field of view than Julius, and his judgment was on the mark for now. More than Julius, an outsider, Hallible's frustration burned hotter, for it was his own familiar ground being menaced. It was precisely those feelings of Hallible's that Julius ought to honor. Hallible, I ain't the hot-blooded type, you know. Sides, I ain't feelin' frustrated. Julius, that is, Hallible, 'cause Anna and the others are gonna handle that twister, ain't they? Right. Shrugging as the gale-like wind washed over him, Hallible spoke, and Julius's eyes widened a fraction. He answered with a firm nod and, indeed. It was pitiable to have Hallible say it first, but indeed, as he said, Julius and company had carried out Anastasia's orders. All that remained was to see, with the time purchased by their delaying action, what Anastasia had managed to ready. The answer revealed itself at once. A black tornado, racing upon the city with ferocious speed, and rising to oppose it, a white tornado. Ricardo, come on, if you don't put your backs into it, Aju's gonna gripe later. Mimi and Iron Fang. Wah! Mimi and Iron Fang. Ha! Before Ricardo, who was rallying them by clanging his great machete and hook claws overhead, Mimi and the Iron Fang howled, blasting out shockwaves of their roars. The kitten folk's adorable unity was not enough to stop that black tornado even when braided together. That said, even cute cries had their uses. They lacked the power to halt a tornado, but they did have the power to nurture one, apparently. Ricardo, all right, we set the table for you, Tia-chan. Now really put your spirit into it. Tia, I know, after all that talk, like I'd be the one to botch it. And anyway, you're the only one not even due. Ricardo, ha. Talking over whatever Tia had been saying, Ricardo joined the child-rearing of the great wind with a roar of his own. After making very sure everyone saw him do it, he clanged his weapons again to goad Tia. Ricardo, right then, be my guest. Tia, fine, I'll do it. Watch me. No sooner had she declared it than Tia shut both eyes and focused. The great seed of wind that had already been stirred up swallowed the cheering of the Iron Fang, then began to spiral, stronger still. At the feel of that wind, the fur all over Ricardo's body stood on end, recalling the wind disaster from the other day. The wind disaster Tia had unleashed. That had been outrageous enough, but their foe this time was a tornado wrought by someone with more than twice Tia's power. As for the rival tornado spawned and reared to oppose it, its scale was enough to make one almost laugh. And then Tivy, Big brother, more, it is not enough, Desuyo. Hetero, I'm gonna get tons of head pats from Big Sis later for sure. Saying so, Tivy and Hetero leveled their staves at the newborn wind's feet. In contrast to Julius, who had been freezing the ground, they set the ground ablaze, raised the wind, and stoked the flames' force. Ricardo did not understand the principle of it, but apparently that, too, was necessary for raising a great wind. In fact, the white tornado swelled rapidly, and soon Tia. Who do you think I am? I'll kill you, you know. Without a doubt, she was the leading architect behind the white tornado's creation, but it sat ill with Tia to be crowing as if it were solely her own strength. As her snarled boast came to its end, tornado met tornado. Black and white, two tornadoes clashed on Bonnen's outskirts, and gusts battered the 4 directions. The collision of those raging winds seemed to portend the spread of yet more harm, yet one thing was certain. Ricardo. Put 'em together and it might be bigger than when there was just one, but the oomph it had as a single twister's gone down. And with slackening and weakening now visible, Hallible. I can finally see the killin' spot. The death god of Kararagi, who flew toward the tornado, had nothing that he could not slay. For the black tornado's whole form wavered greatly, and in the next instant, unraveled as if coming apart. Watching that from a position set a ways back from the battlefield, Anastasia pressed a hand to her chest, relieved. Aridna. Looks like everyone pulled it off. Anastasia. Sure does. We got Julius to come up with a plan that worked right from the start. If you can weaken the wind by working the environment, you can do the reverse and beef it up too. Aridna. Though the Tia-kun who got helped along might look a little dissatisfied about it. Lifting her head so that her white beast fur tickled Anastasia's nape, Echidna drew a murmured, "That's so," from her, as Anastasia stroked her partner's coat in return. That said, Anastasia didn't think Tia would actually bristle as much as all that. Her words and deeds were certainly thorny, but beneath them you could glimpse a basic, irrepressible niceness. She was soft when pressed. For a merchant looking to pitch a product, a perfect mark. Anastasia. Whoops, nah, cleaning Miss Tia out comes later. First, we gotta thank everybody and figure out what the other side was aiming for. Aridna. Their aim, huh? Besides the city's destruction. Anastasia. Easiest read is they were after Miss Tia. If that wind was the work of whoever stole her precious thing, then stubborn Miss Tia would have been in their way. Even so, if they'd gone as far as launching an attack on the scale for that, then the other party lacked both good sense and restraint. It was, to be sure, a commercial harm Kararagi ought to address as a whole. For Anastasia, who kept the Hashin Company's main office in Kararagi, it wasn't a problem she could call somebody else's concern. This might also mean getting back to Lugunica would be delayed for a while, and then stranger. Die, Aridna. Anna. Struck in the eardrums by Echidna's cry at the sudden presence and abrupt declaration, Anastasia whirled around, and there she saw Tia. Or no, someone else who looked very much like Tia. In the next moment, she was swallowed by the sound of the wind, and realization came a beat late. The tornado's target hadn't been Tia. The tornado's true target was... No sooner had the tornado that attacked the city vanished than the group under Anastasia's lead was thrown into fresh chaos. The charming, dependable company head, whose safety they were to welcome, was nowhere to be seen, and before long, everyone understood. That Anastasia and her companions, whisked away by the passing wind, had fallen into the death god's hands. To be continued.